Since Sonic's 20th anniversary is coming up in 2 months and Sonic Generations is coming out this year, I figured I'd go back and take a look at what is regarded to as probably the best Sonic game ever made, Sonic 3 and Knuckles. Sonic 3 and Knuckles is, obviously, the combined games of Sonic 3 and Sonic and Knuckles. The game has some interesting development history. It was developed by Sega Technical Institute in the United States, unlike the last three, Sonic 1, CD, and 2, which were made in Japan. Michael Jackson was one of the composers for the music, however he was uncredited. Depending on where you hear it from, there's two stories. The first is that Sega didn't want to be associated with him due to the scandal that was going on. The other story is that he wasn't happy with how the music sounded because of the limited sound capabilities of the Genesis hardware. Also, depending on where you hear it from, he either composed all the music or only a few tracks of it. Sonic 3 and Sonic Knuckles was supposed to be one full game instead of two, but the development team was running out of time and the size of the cartridge needed to contain the entire game, and the non-volatile RAM needed for the save feature would have been really expensive and would have sent the cartridge manufacturing costs through the roof, and Sega would have lost a lot of money on the game. So they split the development in two, giving them extra time to finish the game and not go under from making expensive cartridges. In fact, if you look in the Sonic 3 manual, you'll see robots that aren't in the game, but in Sonic and Knuckles, and the sound test has stage music from Sonic and Knuckles. And the original concept for Sonic 3 was supposed to be a top-down isometric game. You heard right, the concept for Sonic 3 was what would become one of the worst Sonic games ever, Sonic 3D Blast. This is also the first game to have a save feature, however the save feature is dependent on the rechargeable battery inside of it. And if the battery can no longer hold a charge, the game will never save again, unless you manage to replace the battery. I don't think I need to go into any detail on who Sonic, Tails, or Knuckles are, as they're well fleshed out as characters by now. And if you don't know who they are, please get out from under your rock and join the rest of society. The gameplay is essentially the same as the previous three games. Run to the right until you reach the end. However, they added various gameplay elements that drastically change how you navigate through the stages. Sonic's gameplay is the same, essentially, but jumping twice will activate shield abilities. Jumping twice with no shield gives you what's called the insta-shield, which requires perfect timing, and I mean perfect timing. If you're off by a nanosecond, you'll get hit. The fire shield gives you a dash and protects you from fire, obviously, but is put out in water. The bubble shield allows you to breathe underwater and gives you a bounce ability. And finally, the lightning shield protects you from electricity and gives you a double jump and attracts nearby rings, but shorts out in water. The lightning shield is probably the most versatile out of all the shields. All the shields will also bounce small projectiles off of them, but they disappear after being touched by an enemy or a hazard. Tails can't use the double jump abilities of the shields, however, he can fly in the air, and when flying he can damage enemies with his tails if you attack from underneath, and he can also swim underwater as well. Knuckles also can't use the double jump abilities of the shields, but he can glide and climb up vertical ledges. He doesn't jump as high as Sonic or Tails, but he can take alternate routes that are inaccessible to Sonic and Tails. Knuckles has the shortest game, but probably the hardest as his boss fights are tougher versions of the ones that Sonic and Tails fight. Tails has a longer game by Knuckles, and Sonic's game is longer than Tails. Sonic's game is the full story as it has the final battle with Robotnik. The sound effects are classic Sonic. The music, however, while not annoying like most Genesis games that you've heard me complain about, some of the music is just bad. Marble Garden and Carnival Night are just bad songs, while Launch Base and Mushroom Hill, while not bad, are just boring. But stages like Hydro City, Flying Battery, and Doomsday Zone are pure awesome. The graphics are, well, they're good, don't get me wrong, they are good, but I personally like the graphics in Sonic 2 when compared to this one. If I were to grade them, Sonic 2 would get an A+, and Sonic 3 would be about a C. Acceptable, but you know they could do better. And I hate how Sonic looks in this game. I really, really hate how he looks. The Sonic 2 sprite was so much better looking, especially as Supersonic. He looked badass. In Sonic 3, he looks goofy. His legs are short, his arms are too long, and his hands are enormous, and as Supersonic, he looks terrible and cheaply done. Speaking of Supersonic, the music that plays as Supersonic is the same as the Invincibility music. That is just plain lazy. It's the same 5-second loop over and over, and it's an annoying song. It's annoying for 10 seconds, and hearing it any longer is enough to drive a person insane. In Sonic 2, Supersonic had his own unique music, and it was pretty good. The game continues shortly after Sonic 2. Sonic Tails head off to where Robotnik's Death Egg landed, and finding that it landed on a mystical island that floats in the sky. But it's in the sea. You know, there's a huge plot hole in this game. The island is supposed to be floating in the sky, but in the beginning of the game it's in the ocean. But the Master Emerald is supposed to keep it in the sky, and it's not stolen until the end of the game. So there's some inconsistency there. The stages are enormous. They feel like they're at least 3 times bigger than the ones in Sonic 2. And there's multiple paths that you can take to get to the goal, and the stages flow into each other very nicely. It was worth the time for the extra development, as these nice little touches make this a really great game. In fact, fans of the Sonic series want Sega to remake Sonic 3 and Knuckles. But no matter what, Sonic fans can never be pleased, even when Sonic Team makes a valiant effort in making a good Sonic game. Don't get me wrong, Sonic Team has made some bad Sonic games lately, but they did it to please the fans. The fans wanted a classic Sonic game, and Sonic Heroes was released. They wanted Shadow to have his own game, and we all know how much of a disaster that was. They want Sonic to go back to a 2D platformer, and people still complain when they get what they want. Sonic Colors, probably one of the highest rated recent Sonic games, people still find things to complain about. And I can only imagine what people are going to say when Sonic Generations comes out. You know, there's something that I've noticed. Sonic Adventure marked the last good Sonic game, and Sonic Adventure 2, Sonic's 10th anniversary, marked the beginning of the bad ones. And maybe Sonic Generations will mark the start of the good ones again, so we'll have a 10-year cycle, 10 years of good and 10 years of crap. Sonic 3 also started the tradition of every new game must have a new character, which gives me an idea for my next review. So next week will be my first top 10 list, and it's going to be the top 10 worst Sonic characters ever created.